I have a problem. I need a side table. But not just any side table. I need the perfect side table. Something that will fit this tricky space. Something that is not too eye-popping, but still unique and ties the room together. Luckily, I have the perfect idea. I'm gonna build a table and then set it on fire. You probably think I'm crazy. Why spend dozens of hours designing and building a piece of furniture just to burn it? The reason is simple, because it looks amazing after. While I show you some clips of me milling up the lumber, let me talk about the design. First things first when it comes to design is establishing the silhouette. One of the requirements for this table is it needs to be accessible for someone sitting in the chair and sitting on the couch. A circle is the perfect shape for this functional requirement to fit the tricky space. What I'm doing here is I'm measuring out where to put the stop block in order to replicate the cuts for each of the legs. This way, each of the legs will be the same length. Hey, looks like I have a visitor. The second step in the design process is figuring out the base and the legs. I like traditional modern design, so for me, I wasn't going to go crazy with this part. After wrestling with some different designs, I opted for 2 A-frame legs with some half-lap joinery. The legs would be connected by a solid brass rod. I chose this because I really love when furniture designs mix wood and metal, so I thought this would be a perfect time for me to do my first wood-metal piece. After glue up on the tabletop and doing some quick cleanup, it was time to cut the circle. I cut the circle using this circle cutting router jig, and I went about halfway through the tabletop and then cut the rest out on the bandsaw and then flush trimmed it on the router table. The last step of the design phase is figuring out what wood to use. Since I already have a good amount of walnut in the room, walnut was out for me. My next favorite is white oak, but I didn't think that would work well. And then I got a great idea. How about black? The only issue with this was I tend to keep my pieces as natural as possible, so I wasn't open to black stain. So I did a bit of research to figure out how I can have a natural black finish, and I stumbled across Shou Sugi Ban. Now in this clip you can see me mapping out where I want this support piece to be on the legs. And this is something that I've learned over the projects that I've had is you don't have to necessarily be super precise. You just have to be consistent. So this is, it's not a measurement that I'm taking. I just map it out. I go with what my gut says, feels, and looks good, and then I cut it. But the most important part is just making sure that it's consistent. Now, Shou Sugi Ban is a traditional Japanese technique of burning wood. This gives it a preservation quality. Learning about Shou Sugi Ban naturally led me to think about the origin story. How did this technique come to life? I imagine the first time a furniture maker tried this method was probably out of frustration, a failed project that led to an impulsive decision to light the piece on fire. In this ridiculously inaccurate imagination of the origin story, the maker's flame ran out, causing for more frustration. The maker asking, "I can't even successfully burn my piece," all for the maker to wave away the smoke to see a beautiful black rustic finish. Well, this part of the project is the reason why I did the entire project, and it did not disappoint. Despite being extremely eager and maybe a little bit too eager and not prepared enough during this step, the project turned out incredible, way better than I expected. The texture was something that I couldn't even imagine what would happen, as well as the color. The color was incredible. It was so deep and black. This was awesome. Since this is the first time that I utilized this technique, I learned a lot from this project. First, I learned about warping. Now, I didn't think about this beforehand, but it makes sense after the fact. Heating the wood up would dry out the wood, causing it to warp. This is something that I'll take into consideration next time. Another takeaway was how this technique really caused me to change speed. Typically with my projects, everything has to be perfect. Every piece of lumber needs to be perfectly flat, perfectly square. Every joint has to be as crispy as possible. The finish has to be as even as possible. But that wasn't the case with this project, which was really nice, because if I didn't sand thoroughly enough, if the top wasn't as flat as possible, if there was some gaps in the joints, it would get lit on fire at the end of the day. And that firing process would cause imperfections to be erased. I'm all for perfecting the craft, but this change was refreshing. What do I do with my hands? How about this?